Welcome to Beat Diabetes, where we discuss strategies and share insights, not just so that you can merely endure your affliction, but to actually whip this monster and drive your glucose levels down from diabetic to non-diabetic. On today's edition, we'll look at nuts. Are they good for diabetics? And are any of them any worse than any others? And why is it that you might want to leave off nuts in the evenings? We'll also consider the high-starch diet. How in the world can some say they've reversed diabetes eating a plate with half of their food being potatoes and rice? Does that really work? Coming up. If you've recently been diagnosed with diabetes and you've just discovered this channel, let me recommend that you go to our Uploads page, which will give you access to every diabetic video we've posted since we began. As you work your way through all our videos, I believe you'll find the help you need. A link to our Uploads page is in the description. So here's a question. The person says, help me know about nuts, hazelnuts, Brazil nuts, pistachios, almonds, cashews, peanuts, etc., how they affect blood sugar. I eat them a lot. Uh-oh. Well, for one thing, you sound sort of like me. I can eat nuts a lot if I would let myself go too crazy. Well, there are some pros and some cons with nuts. The pros are that they're essentially good for you. There was a time when nuts were all, were considered good by everybody, and then there came the low-fat movement. Anything with fat must be an evil monster. Get rid of the nuts because they have a lot of fat. And then that changed. And, oh, it's okay. You can eat nuts after all. And so that's gone back and forth. As far as I'm concerned, nuts are perfectly fine in most respects. One thing, eliminate the cashews. Cashews have almost twice as many carbs as most other nuts. So they're probably the worst nut. And I know that's painful to hear because they taste great. And I love them and I could eat them all over the place if I would allow myself to, but I don't. Once in a while, I'll buy some mixed nuts and they'll have a few cashews in them and I'll eat them and not worry about them. But otherwise, I would never buy just plain cashews for myself. Nuts do have carbs. It's not like they don't have any. And so those carbs can add up. The one thing about nuts is they are so hard and they dissolve so slowly in your body. They release their carbs in a gentler, kindlier fashion. So they're not likely to cause a spike. I said on another program that I will sometimes eat nuts to help me ease back down if I go too high. And the way they do that, somebody said, well, how do they lower your glucose? They don't lower it. They just keep it from going down too fast because they release their carbs in a very gradual manner. Nuts are kind of like logs. If you're burning a log in the fireplace, it'll take hours to burn itself through. Whereas if you can take a few skinny little kindling sticks, they'll burn through in a few minutes. So bread is the kindling, and nuts are the logs. But nuts don't have that many carbs in the first place as long as you eat a moderate amount. So they're not bad. But here's one thing I've sort of suspected. I can't say I can prove this, but I suspect it's true from what I know and from my own experience. That the idea of nuts dissolving very slowly and releasing their carbs very gradually is, for the most part, a good thing because they prevent spikes. But at night, basically, you want to eat your final meal and get all those carbs dealt with, whatever carbs are there. Hopefully, there won't be many. And then you have all night and all through your sleeping time where your blood sugar is just low, hopefully, unless your liver is dumping all kinds of fat off of it. But the problem with nuts is you may eat those nuts fairly late, let's say 7:30, but they may still be gently releasing their carbs and dissolving in your stomach hours later because they are very hard and very slow to dissolve. So as a result, they could keep your glucose levels up a bit, granted not too much, but a bit, rather than if you just ate some foods that didn't dissolve so slowly. So kind of a mixed bag there. Okay, here is a person who has a different view of things than I do. And he seems to have gotten results. He says he has, and I'm not going to say he hasn't, although I might question if he has quite the results he thinks he does. Anyway, he says, I've been eating Dr. McDougall's starch-based diet for almost a year now. My main starch, which takes up half my plate, is white rice and potatoes. And the other half of my plate is an assortment of whatever vegetables I feel like eating that day. And I have completely reversed my type 2 diabetes, as many others have, eating this way. So he's got a big old plate. Half of it is rice and potatoes, lots of starch, and then some vegetables, whatever he wants. Now, on the positive side, there's no dessert. There's no sugary stuff. There's no candy. There's no soda. I don't think McDougall would recommend that sort of a thing. So he's doing some things right for sure. But, you know, I would have a problem with that kind of a diet. It would drive my glucose crazy, I can tell you that. But he goes on to say this, and I think this needs to be spoken about, dealt with, talked about. He says, your blood sugar is supposed to rise after you eat, so that doesn't matter. Let's rewind that and play it again. According to him, your blood sugar is supposed to rise after you eat, so that doesn't matter. Well, part of that, of course, is true. Your blood sugar will rise. Yours will rise, mine will rise, your mama's will rise. Everybody's blood sugar is going to rise after they eat. That's not the argument. That's not the discussion. That's not the thing I would question. The question is, how much should it rise? If I start out with a blood sugar of 98 and I have a low-carb meal and it rises to 124, I'm well satisfied. You know, somebody might say, oh, Dennis, your blood sugar rose. Well, of course it did. You know, that's what's normally going to happen. Now, it won't always happen. You know, I've eaten some things that it actually went down a little bit, but for the most part it will. So he says your blood sugar is supposed to rise. Well, yeah. But if I start at 98 with a big old high-starch dinner, potatoes and rice, and then I drink a big Coke alongside of it, which I don't think he would recommend, but some people would, and it rises from 98 to 226, that's not healthy, my friend. Now, he goes on to say, you know, it's supposed to rise after you eat. That's fine. That's no problem, as long as it goes down to normal, which it will, he says, and you'll lose excess weight and you'll be healthy again and so forth. Well, first of all, for a lot of diabetics, when you push your blood sugar up past 200 or even into the high 100s, 185, 190, 195, it won't go down in 2 hours. For many, it won't. But even if it does, have you really done yourself a favor? You know, if, for example, you eat a big high-carb meal and before the meal you're at 100, an hour later you're at 225, 2 hours later you're at 135, 3 hours later you're at 120. So, you know, within 2 hours you're in a relatively safe place. So is all well? Well, first of all, blood sugar that's spiking and lowering and spiking and lowering, spiking and diving, up and down like a yo-yo is not healthy. They've done numerous trials and research about brittle diabetics and spiking diabetics that are just jumping up and down. And the agreement, the consensus is that's not good. But here's another thing to think about. According to a lot of those who have been studying this, including Dr. Jason Fung, who's probably the preeminent person who declares this, diabetes is a result, type 2 we're talking about, type 2 diabetes is a result of having too much insulin in your blood for too long, for too many years. And the idea is this: if your body's constantly dealing with insulinemia, high insulin in the morning, high insulin in the afternoons, high insulin in the evening, high insulin as you sleep, your body, out of sheer survival instinct, begins to reject insulin, and insulin loses its efficiency. You become insulin insensitive, or the other word is insulin resistant. And your body just can't handle the insulin, won't deal with it. It just goes on strike, and insulin doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And that, over a long period of time, is what most of the people that I listen to say is the cause of type 2 diabetes. Your body just finally wears out, your pancreas wears out, and all that insulin is taking its toll. Never mind the high glucose, which is bad in itself. It's terrible in itself. And high glucose is horrible, even with no insulin. A type 1 can tell you that. If they let their glucose go into the 200s, 300s, 400s, and stay there, even if they're taking very little insulin, it's not good for them. And it will do all kinds of damage. But for the type 2, there's often a chance where your glucose is too high and your insulin is too high. And if in this scenario that this guy's talking about, where he says, well, it's okay because, yeah, you'll spike up, but don't worry about that. You'll come down after a couple hours or 3 hours, and all will be well. When your glucose comes down, guess what? Your insulin does not come down with it. It hangs around. Insulin lingers, whereas glucose can come down fairly quickly, sometimes too quickly, and you'll crash and you'll get shaky and you may even pass out, which I have. But even if you don't, it's not a good feeling when insulin comes down too fast. But, when glucose comes down too fast. But when insulin hangs around, which it will, so your glucose is down by 2 hours, but your insulin may take 4 hours or 5 hours to come down. About the time it's starting to come down to normal, you have another meal and you shove in all those starches and those potatoes and all that white rice and those big dinner rolls, and you swish it down with fruit juice, and bam, up goes the glucose, up goes the insulin. Glucose comes down after a while. Insulin takes longer. So you run around with high glucose quite a bit of the time, but high insulin almost all the time. And insulin by itself is a disaster. Dr. Michael Eads calls it a rogue hormone. In small amounts, it's perfect. It's what you need. You'll be in trouble without it, as any type 1 diabetic can tell you. But in excess amounts, where you're just flooded with insulin, it is a very unhealthy situation. And my fear is that many of these people doing this high-starch diet with a half a plate of rice and potatoes and then whatever other vegetables they want to eat are jacking up their insulin. But they say, well, yeah, but, your blood sugar is supposed to come down. It's supposed to rise up and then come down. That's natural. So they talk themselves out of worrying about the fact that it is going to spike. They know it will spike. They know it does spike, and we can prove it with Mike the Meter, and they could prove it with Mike the Meter. But their justification is, yeah, it spikes, but it'll come down. But again, the insulin won't. So I just don't buy it. You have to choose for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you why I don't think that's a good idea, but you'll have to choose for yourself. And as I've said before, your life is a gamble. Your diet is a gamble. If you want to throw the dice and say, well, I'm going to gamble that all that high insulin and all those spikes up and down, up and down, up and down are going to be okay, and I can live into my 80s and be healthy and have no problems, fine, if that's what you choose to gamble on. But I'll tell you this, I have heard from many vegans and high starchers that became full-fledged diabetics. So take that for however you want to take it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you found this video a blessing, give it a thumbs up so YouTube will recognize its value and cause it to show up to other diabetics as one of its recommended videos. And I hope you'll subscribe to this channel and click on that bell icon so you'll be notified every time we post a new video. God bless. See you again soon.